Welcome to PM Ready, your guide to becoming PMP certified. This is the Review Documents and Artifacts lesson. In this lesson, we review the names, purpose, components, and characteristics of the key project management documents and artifacts. This lesson is structured something like a quiz. If possible, if you're in a situation in which you can sit down and with paper and pen, write down some of the answers as they come to you as we go through this lesson, that would provide you with the most benefit. Actually, writing down your answers helps you to learn and remember this information. During the pauses, pause the lesson if need be, and make note of the answers that you come up with along the way. The PMBOK guide identifies three main categories of documents and organizes the project management documents into these three categories. Can you remember the names of these three categories? They are business documents, the project management plan and all of its components, and other project documents. Here's a bonus question. Which critical document is not listed in any of the above categories in the PMBOK guide? The answer is the project charter. The project charter is in a category of its own, if you will. It's neither a business document nor part of the project management plan, nor is it listed among the other project documents. There are two project business documents in the business documents category. Can you remember what these are? I'll give you some hints. These are pre-initiating documents. They come before any of the processes identified in the PMI process table. And there are no specific project management processes for creating these documents. They are the project business case and the project benefits management plan. Notice that you don't see here the needs assessment, which is specifically mentioned in the PMBOK guide, but not as a separate document, though it probably would be recorded as a separate document. And what are the purposes of the needs assessment, the project business case, and the project benefits management plan? The purpose of the needs assessment is to understand the business goals and objectives, issues and opportunities, and recommend proposals to address them. The purpose of the project business case is to provide an economic feasibility study used to establish the validity of the benefits of a proposed project. The purpose of the project benefits management plan is to define the processes for creating, maximizing, and sustaining project or program benefits. Regarding the project charter, who issues the project charter? What is its purpose? And what are the benefits of the project charter itself? The project charter is issued by the project initiator or project sponsor, not the project manager. The purpose of the project charter is to formally authorize the existence of a project and to provide the project manager with the authority to manage the project. The benefits of the project charter are that it links the project to the organization's strategic objectives. It provides a formal record of the project and demonstrates organizational commitment to the project. And how about the project management plan? What is its purpose? What are some of its characteristics, not specific components? And what are its components? The purpose of the project management plan is that it defines the basis of all project work and how the work will be performed. Essentially, it's the rule book that provides you all the rules and guidelines for how you will manage the project. Its characteristics, not including components, are that the content of the project management plan can vary depending on the application area and the complexity of the project. It can be a summary level plan, or it can be very detailed, and it can be progressively elaborated during the life cycle of the project to provide more and more details as you go along. The project management plan is baselined. Once it's been approved, it can only be changed through the Perform Integrated Change Control process. And it should be aligned with the program or portfolio management plans that this project is a part of. And what are the components of the project management plan? You have one component for each of the other 9 knowledge areas: a scope management plan, a schedule management plan, and so on for cost, quality, resource, communications, risk, and procurement. And they all have the same name of management plan, except for the last one, the stakeholder engagement plan. And there are more components that go beyond the list of 9 knowledge areas. These are the requirements management plan, the change management plan, and the configuration management plan. In addition to these 3 other management plans, you also have 4 baselines that are the scope baseline, the schedule baseline, the cost baseline, and then the performance measurement baseline, which is used by earned value analysis. Then you have 3 more items: the project lifecycle description, the development approach, and the management reviews, which is a schedule of when the project management plan and project will be reviewed periodically during the life cycle of the project. It may help you to remember all of these different components by organizing them into some groups. First of all, you have 12 management plans. Plans from the other 9 knowledge areas, plus 3 others: requirements, change, and configuration management plans. You then have 4 baselines for scope, schedule, cost, and then the combined baseline of performance measurement. And then you have 3 other miscellaneous components: the life cycle, the development approach, and the management reviews. So speaking of requirements and scope, what is the difference between the requirements of the project and the scope of the project? The short answer is that the requirements are an expression from your stakeholders of what is needed, what they would like to see in the project. The scope is a narrowing or clarification of the requirements to specify what exactly you're going to do on the project, which is generally a shorter list than all of the requirements that were identified, but may also include a few other necessary items. Knowing the difference between requirements and scope, what is the difference between the requirements management plan and the scope management plan? The requirements management plan specifies how the project and product requirements will be analyzed, documented, and managed. It's sometimes referred to as the business analysis plan. The scope management plan specifies how the project and product scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. Notice that these definitions are difficult to distinguish unless you understand the difference between requirements and scope. Otherwise, they're somewhat similar, except that they have a different context. Also notice that in both of these cases, neither of these plans have the details of the requirements or scope in them. They are again your guidebooks for how you will manage requirements and scope, but they don't actually list the requirements and scope in them. Now let's take a look at the scope management knowledge area. Try and list out all of the scope management documents and artifacts that you can remember. And here's the list. You have the scope management plan and the requirements management plan. Also, the requirements documentation, which includes all of the requirements. The requirements traceability matrix, which you can use to connect the requirements to all sorts of other things in the project, whether it's to the business case and needs identified and benefits identified early on, as well as the different quality requirements and the status of the requirement itself. Then you have the scope baseline, which consists of the project scope statement, which is your very detailed document that defines all of the scope of the project. The work breakdown structure that organizes this entire scope into a hierarchy, and the WBS Dictionary, which includes all of the detail to go along with this work breakdown structure. Next, we have the requirements documentation. What is its purpose, and what are some of its characteristics? Its purpose is that it describes how individual requirements meet the business need for the project. And some of its characteristics are that before being baselined, requirements need to be unambiguous, that is, measurable and testable, traceable, complete, consistent, and acceptable to key stakeholders. What is the requirements traceability matrix, and what are some of its characteristics and benefits? The requirements traceability matrix is a grid that links product requirements from their origin to the deliverables that satisfy them. It helps to ensure that each requirement adds business value. It provides a means to track requirements throughout the life cycle of the project. And it provides a structure for managing changes to the product scope. And what are the components of the scope baseline? The project scope statement, the work breakdown structure, and the work breakdown structure dictionary. What is the project scope statement, and what are some of its characteristics? The project scope statement is the description of the project scope, major deliverables, and assumptions and constraints. It documents the entire scope, including both project and product scope. It describes the project's deliverables in detail. It may also list specific exclusions of the scope, things that specifically will not be included in the project, just for clarity. And it's the baseline for evaluating whether a request for change or other additional work is contained within or outside the project's boundaries. How about the work breakdown structure? What's its purpose and key characteristics? First of all, the work breakdown structure is a hierarchical decomposition of the total scope of work. Each descending level represents an increasingly detailed definition of the project work. It represents the work specified in the current approved project scope document. And it represents all of the product and project work, including project management. And your work breakdown structure should follow the 100% rule, which means that each level of your work breakdown structure should sum up to entirely what is represented in the level above, and no more and no less. So when you're breaking things down into lower levels, make sure that you don't forget something and end up with a lower level that doesn't entirely capture the level above. And the Work Breakdown Structure Dictionary, or WBS Dictionary. What is this, and what does it contain? The WBS Dictionary is a document that provides detailed deliverable activity and scheduling information about each component of the work breakdown structure. It gets all of this information from other documents so that it can include a code of account ID, a description of the work for each item or work package in the WBS structure itself, any assumptions and constraints for each item, the responsible organization, schedule milestones, associated schedule activities, the resources that are required, the cost estimates, the quality requirements, acceptance criteria, as well as any technical references and agreement information. As you can see, a lot of information is captured here that comes from a number of different project management documents. The bottom line is that it's all in here. The WBS Dictionary has or provides a representation or view of everything that needs to be done on the project and all of its details. And now we move on to the schedule management knowledge area. Take a moment to list as many of the key documents and other schedule artifacts that you can remember. The key schedule management artifacts include the schedule management plan, the activity list and activity attributes of those activities, the milestone list, the project schedule network diagram that has all of these different activities connected in their appropriate logical order, but without durations yet. And so there's a separate document for duration estimates and the basis of estimates that explains how those estimates were derived. You then have the schedule baseline, the project schedule, the schedule data with all of the details of the project schedule, project calendars, and schedule forecasts. Next, we come to the cost management knowledge area and its key documents and artifacts. Take a moment to write these down. First, we have the cost management plan, followed by cost estimates and the basis of estimates for those cost estimates, your cost baseline, your project funding requirements, as well as cost forecasts. You can also see from a couple of these diagrams here on the right, representations of the project budget, which includes the cost baseline, as well as your project funding requirements, which is represented using a time-phased diagram showing your expected expenses and your expected and needed funding along the way. Now it's time to think of and list the quality management documents and artifacts. For quality management, you have the quality management plan, as well as the quality metrics that will be used to measure quality during the project, quality reports that report on these measurements. your test and evaluation documents, which are generated to provide templates for what information you need to test and evaluate and to fill in these templates as you're controlling quality. You then have your quality control measurements and your verified deliverables, which are those deliverables which have been checked against the quality requirements and found to be satisfactory. And we can't leave the subject of quality without first reviewing the difference between metrics and measurements. Take a moment and see if you can remember the difference, as well as perhaps an example. A metric is something that specifically describes a project or product attribute and how to measure it. For example, the cost performance index and its formula could be specified as a metric, and the formula shows how to measure it. Plus, you'd also have other details about how costs will be measured on your project, such as whether you're including direct and indirect costs and so on. The measurement is what is taken as specified by the metric. So you might measure your cost performance index and report it as 1.08. And now we move on to the resource management knowledge area and its key documents and artifacts. Take a moment to list these. You have the resource management plan and the team charter. You also have the resource requirements for your project and the basis of estimates, detailing how you came up with this list of resource requirements. These resources are then organized into your resource breakdown structure. You also have your physical resource requirements, your project team assignments, and resource calendars to go with your team members and other resources, and your team performance assessments. Next, we have the stakeholder engagement and communications key documents and artifacts. We've combined these because they're so closely related and because the list is not very long. So take just a moment to write down those that you can remember. The key artifacts are the stakeholder register, which includes this list of stakeholders and some analysis, the stakeholder engagement plan, the communications management plan, and your project communications. And how about your risk management documents and artifacts? Take a moment and see how many risk management artifacts you can remember. We have the risk management plan, the risk register, and the risk report. But you also have qualitative risk analysis and quantitative risk analysis that are added to your risk register, as well as your risk responses, also added to your risk register. Although not separate documents, these are important artifacts that are generated as part of your risk management. And now we come to procurement management and its key artifacts. There are a few here, so take a moment. First, we have the procurement management plan, the procurement strategy, your various bid documents, such as requests for proposal, your procurement statement of work defining specifically what your vendor needs to do, your source selection criteria for how you're going to choose a vendor, make or buy decisions as to whether you're going to try and do this in-house or outsource this work. Independent cost estimates can also be important to this process. Your selected sellers and the agreements or contracts with those sellers, and at the end of the project, closed procurements. I've saved the integration management knowledge area for last because it integrates all of the other knowledge areas. Take a moment to list the key artifacts of integration management. The key integration management artifacts are the project management plan, also the change management plan, and with it, the configuration management plan. Closely related, you have the change log, as well as approved change requests. Also the assumption log, your issue log, and your lessons learned register. Work performance data and work performance reports, and your project's final report that goes along with the deliverables and the final product, service, or result transition. All of these fall under the category of integration management. And what's the difference between work performance data, work performance information, and work performance reports? The differences are that work performance data includes the raw observations and measurements. Work performance information is this work performance data that has now been analyzed and compared with the plan and other documents and project information. Work performance reports take this work performance information and compile it into project documents that are intended to generate decisions, prompt action, or bring awareness. And that's the end of this lesson, which has been to review some of the key project management documents and artifacts, which will help you to understand where you can find the information you need on a project, and to answer those questions on the PMP exam that ask you where you can find key information at key points during the project. PM Ready is a publication of PM Guaranteed and is based on the Project Management Institute's PMBOK guide.